Yep, there it is.
Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahar, and
So, if anyone doesn't know, Bill C-11 is a Canadian bill that's been in the works for like 4 years or something like that. It just got passed, and what it is it makes it so Canada has the right to control how essentially control the algorithm in Canada for like YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that to push out Canadian content and other reasons, and other things. But the problem is that it creates a lot of weird problems for streamers or for YouTubers and stuff like that are in Canada. It's actually harmful to them more than like even more so than like for YouTube or anything like that.
woohoo! If you think that I should be screaming at the top of my lungs because Canada's infamous Bill C-11 has passed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been kind of likened to the Censorship Act in the country, the Protect Act, the Restrict Act of Canada, if you will, something really doom and gloom. And to an extent, it's such a badly written piece of legislation, especially for content creators.
It has like good intentions. Like if you hear like the way people like talk about it, right? It's saying YouTube has to and Google has to adjust the algorithm so that Canadian content creators are shown more favorably in Canada so that they can boost Canadian content creators inside their own countries. That's what they're trying to make of it, and that's like the purpose of it. But the problem is that it's not. It doesn't exactly turn out that way.
And people in the online web space that even YouTube had an entire campaign coming up to me, probably Linus, JJ McCullough, a bunch of Canadian creators, and it basically begged us to call the MPs, raise some awareness. Hey, YouTube, if you want to affect politics, do it the old American way, throw some of that Google money around, if you will. But, ladies and gentlemen, Bill C-11 has passed in the last 2 days. Now, if you notice that I'm not necessarily sage or crazy, it's because, I try to always find outs, okay? So, we've moved our company, pretty much. We've started a new one down in the United States. I'm going to see how regulation goes in the next few months, but there's a pretty good chance that we'll probably move all of our operations to the United States, which means that a lot of that.
So I'm not entirely sure why. So I know a lot of people are worrying about backlash from YouTube being like, okay, yeah, we promote your content in Canada, but nowhere else. I don't know if they're necessarily going to get that backlash, but there's some nuance to this I'm not completely understanding of like why a lot of content creators are really mad about it.
Money that would have been generated in Canada will just feed right back into the United States. Bold thinking there, Canadian government, trying to push out your digital creators to greener pastures, if you will. Now, I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. Most creators don't have that luxury. Most people don't have the luxury to uproot their stuff and move down to greener pastures. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bill C-11 has reached royal assent, which means all it really needs is to be signed in. It's basically when the bill becomes the law. Now, according to the law, right over here, the most recent text that I have, they basically talk about, a few exclusions they have, such as social media services, an online undertaking, which, according to their own language, enterprise en ligne, means an undertaking for the transmission or retransmission of programs over the internet for reception by the public by means of broadcasting receiving apparatus. So when they're talking about this, they're including...
I hate legal speak. Like, that sentence is needlessly complicated.
Big organizations like Netflix, like Amazon Prime Video, like YouTube. At the end of the day, the broadcasting bill is mostly aligned not just for not for censorship. That's not what it's designed for. It's designed to really target the big tech companies that have now come into Canada. To understand, Canada is a country that's pretty much run by monopolies and oligopolies. So in Canada, when it comes to TV and video,
I mean, so is America. Like, look at I'm sure that you can find flowcharts of where all food is like owned by, and it's owned by like 4 or 5 companies, all food, processed food that we eat, and all of America is owned by like 4 companies in total.
Broadcast, which is a field I worked in pretty extensively, we have the big broadcasters like Rogers, like Bell, like Shaw Media. A lot of these guys have been in Canada since the beginning, and unfortunately for them, a lot of these American companies like Netflix, like YouTube have come in and absolutely given a whole variety of options for Canadians. Now, for a lot of Canadian broadcasting laws, there was a requirement of Canadian content to be produced. Now, up until this law passed, the only people that had to follow it were some of these big Canadian broadcasters. Not YouTube, not Netflix, not Spotify, not these American tech companies. Because of how much broadcasting these companies do now, Canada is now regulating them all the same. So that's kind of the pretext for this. So according to this law...
Which, I mean, regulating all of these internet companies is not necessarily a bad thing. We've been missing this regulation for like 30 years now, pretty much.
When it comes to social media services, an online undertaking that provides a social media service does not, for the purpose of this act, exercise programming control over programs uploaded by a user of the service who is not the provider of the service or the provider's affiliate. So
what does that even mean? What?
So this amendment is actually pretty good, and it's the reason why I think YouTube has not really been saying anything ever since this bill has passed. But to give you a quick idea of what this effectively is doing is, obviously YouTube is an online undertaking. It's a broadcaster. If you go to YouTube right now, you can buy TVs, movies, whatever you want. That is technically what they want to regulate. They want to push more Canadian content in that category for average users. So when they say it's uploaded by a user who is not the owner, so basically people like me, I don't own YouTube, I upload to it, or even an affiliate, which is actually good wording because it could mean like, hey, I am partnered with YouTube, right? But
I have no clue why he's showing Cyberpunk gameplay right now. I'm kind of confused by that, but it's not the point.
That doesn't mean that I own YouTube. I'm just, I guess you would say, a loosely worded affiliate. And the same would go for a TikToker. I think the same would go for anybody who's on a platform that offers revenue sharing, which I think is a good amendment. But there is one piece later on in this entire legal document that kind of throws everything up into limbo, if you will. Again, the problem with laws like this is they're so vaguely written, all right? And again, it's not easy to be hyper definitive when it comes to legal matters, but you know,
it's the same problem that the TikTok ban bill is having, like the bill to like regulate online like social media sites that are not American based. That America, I think they passed it or they're going to pass that bill. I don't remember which. But the problem with it is that it's super vague.
It's tough. Well, let's go look a little bit further into it, but for now, this is actually a pretty good amendment. Now, the really scary part about this is YouTube is telling us, Canadian creators, that this can affect the algorithm forcibly. Right now, the way that the recommendation system works is it picks the perfect content for you to watch, even if you're not signed into YouTube.
Better question, why doesn't anyone in Canada get more Canadian media through their algorithms by default? What's skewing the data? Quality. The number of creators is larger American than there is Canadian creators. And so by default, by quality, you have a higher number of better. So if you have a higher pool, right? So if you have 100 creators that are American and you have 50 creators that are Canadian, and let's say 5% of creators have a high enough quality that they get pushed through the algorithm, then in America you get 5 creators, in Canada you get 2. So, you get 55% of 50. Yes, it's like 2.5. So bullshit has saturated the entire media market. Well, America, as we are a culture exporter. Like, even though we don't really have a culture too much because we're such a mixing pot, as Americans, but we, because of how our movies are aired around the world, our music is played around the world, and is like top of the charts all around the world. We are such a cultural force worldwide that people consume our media more readily. It's just a thing that happens. So even if it's not even necessarily that we've saturated the market, it's also that I feel like Americans as a culture as well is pushed more towards being content creators. While like say someone in like Romania, they might be shunned if they're trying to be a YouTuber, right? I don't know the culture there. I just picked a random country. But because of that, Americans we might push like, hey, yeah, everybody be a content creator. Everyone be on your TikToks, your Instagram, whatever. Like it's so great. Everyone wants to be famous. In America, we don't see that as a bad thing. Other cultures might. And then on top of it, that we're culture exporters like crazy. We Americans just dominate the market on when it comes to social media. It's just how it is. We're also massive social media consumers as well, so that adds to it. But the Canadians, they're because the saturation, they don't have as many Canadian creators with a high enough quality that they get viewed by a large amount of the population. So they get recommended Americans more often than Canadians themselves. That's just how the algorithm shakes out. So at the same time, they do get pushed like local news. Like I'm sure your YouTube also recommends you like local state news. I get recommended Oregon news on YouTube all the time. Like, hey, what's going on in Oregon? I get that all the time. So there's that, but it's a little more complicated than that. Is the problem? They're wanting more regulation, and the main problem with this bill, as I'm sure Mutahar is going to come into it, is that it also requires these social media sites like YouTube and TikTok to pay, or to essentially pay money to help promote Canadian creators more. Like I'm sure he'll get to it. I can't. I don't know the bill like the back of my hand or anything like that, but I know that's a part of it.
You have a digital footprint on the site. Your cookies, your browser fingerprinting, basically all the videos you watch here all tally up and create a profile of you. YouTube recommends what you are most likely to watch. So the reason why this is bad for creators if the government gets involved is YouTube and a lot of these companies like TikTok invest millions, billions of dollars into making the perfect recommendation systems. So when YouTube recommends you my video, it's because you're probably more likely to watch me over somebody else, even covering the same topic. And again, this is
and that has to do with quality. I mean, I'm an American watching him. You're an American. You like Muda, right? A lot of people in Bangladesh probably like Muda. People in Ecuador probably like Muda. It has nothing to do with regional, and I'm sure people in Canada prefer to watch Mogul Mail, right? It has all to do with like preference choice, and quality is what right now is what it is right now. It's all about the quality of the content, not where you're from. And that's what Canada wants to regulate. They want to regulate more Canadian content for their viewership. It's kind of a form of censorship, but it's worded in a way to try and help promote Canadian creators. It's a very monkey's paw bill.
Purely merit-based solution. YouTube wants it like this, not because they're trying to help me out, but because they want you to be on their site for hours a day. You ever wonder like, damn, I've been browsing shorts or TikTok or watching YouTube videos for 5 hours. That's because YouTube is giving you the content you want to watch on autoplay or the recommended, so you keep dumping hours of your life into watching their videos. Because the more YouTube you watch, the less of their competitors you watch, and the more ads you watch, and the more money you generate for YouTube. That's the whole goal of this situation. So again, when the government gets involved, what they want to do is promote people like me to more Canadians. Now, the reason this is bad is if I'm artificially shown to Canadians who don't want to watch my videos for whatever reason, then because they won't click on my video, I get punished internationally. Now, Canadians have never gotten the benefit from the Canadian Media Fund or content or whatever in a broad scale.
Okay, so now that's the bit of it that I wasn't picking up on. That for some reason my brain wasn't realizing that. Yeah, if the algorithm is pushed towards more Canadians, and they're just like, oh hey, yeah, I don't want to watch this person, then he gets more. So like YouTube will see if the video is recommended to you and you don't click on it, it is negative for your video. So if his content is recommended to more people in Canada who just don't want to watch it, and they just skip it or they downvote it because they don't want it to keep being recommended to them, it hurts his content overall.
We've always been competing on our own. So for the government to get involved and try to protect us is fucking meaningless. And we don't really care for it. Any Canadian creator that's falling for the Kool-Aid doesn't actually understand how bad this is. If you want to succeed in the global village, you have to compete with the global village. So again, let's go back down into here, okay? So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look into further acts of this law. So for instance, right over here, they actually tell you paragraphs in 7, they tell you programming. And this is the programming right here. It reflects the Indigenous cultures of Canada, and programming that is in Indigenous languages should be provided. So basically for the native population over here, they need to have their programming pushed, especially for when they're positioned to serve smaller and remote communities, which is important. What these guys want to do is make sure when you're on the rural side of Canada, your local news, your provincial news gets pushed more in the algorithm than everyone else or the big tech. But of course, you've got program that is accessible without barriers to person with disabilities should be provided with.
So they want to make it YouTube force more regional content. You need more caffeine for this? Oh yeah, 100%. This is the anytime law is involved, it's crazy. So my general take on politics is that any one topic at all, out of every single person on the entire planet. All right, I'll join you after I finish this video. And any one topic, there is 1% of the population on the entire planet that is educated enough to talk on it. That knows every single factor of it and knows every single bit that law can touch. Because what, like you pass this bill, it affects technology, it affects Canadian creators, it's going to affect the economy, it butterfly effects into a million things. I'd say there's like 1% of the population that could actually understand what this bill is affecting in its entirety. And they're super smart. And the problem is that 1% isn't the same 1% that can talk about and can fully understand another law and another part of the law. And the law is politics is so vast that anyone who's talking about it, any part of it, is extremely what's the word I'm looking for? Ignorant. And not by fault of their own, just by the fault that it's so massively encompassing and requires just so much knowledge and butterfly effects. And I'm including myself in this. That's why I don't like to talk politics, because any topic of politics is so butterfly effect that it's impossible to actually know what you're talking about.
Within the Canadian broadcasting system, okay, they want all of that. Programming that is accessible without barriers to persons with disabilities. Now, importantly, it's 7Q, which we have to read. Online undertakings that provide the programming services of other broadcasting undertakings should ensure the discoverability of Canadian programming services and original Canadian programming, including French language programs, in an equitable proportion. So what they're talking about is CanCon. Now, if you don't know what CanCon is effectively a moniker for Canadian content, which basically is a requirement by the Canadian Radio, Televisions and Commission, basically the FCC of Canada, if you will, where basically radio and television, or I guess streaming broadcasters now, have to produce a certain amount of content that is partially written, produced, or presented in Canada. Now, I've worked with people who are producing CanCon a lot. So again, when it comes to Canadians, like Canadian content, right from a government website, if you check what makes it Canadian, you'll see right here. So in order for it to be, the producer has to be Canadian. Now, let's just relegate this to a, somebody uploading.
So like if Muta's editor is American, does that hurt his content?
YouTube videos like me. So the producer must be Canadian. I am. My nationality is Canadian. My driver's license is from my province. Yes, I'm a Canadian. The production earns a minimum of 6 out of 10 points, where the key creative functions are performed by Canadians. Now, for a content creator like me, the points could easily be: I'm the director, I'm the screenwriter, I'm the performer, I'm the production designer, I'm all of these things, okay? So as long as 6 out of 10 of these points all go to a Canadian, me, it should technically be CanCon. Now, of course,
a law that has like a point system feels really weird to me. Am I the only one who has that, like, oh, you have to score enough points in order to enter into this section of the law? Yeah, that feels really weird. Very, very, very gamey.
At least one of either the director or screenwriter positions, or at least one of the two performers, must be Canadian. These are roles you cannot give to an American or anybody that's a foreign national. A minimum of 75% of program expenses and 75% of post-production expenses are paid for services provided by Canadians. So if I'm running my own company and I'm paying myself to edit videos, then yes, I could argue that 100% of that post-production money went to me. That's not including people I'm subcontracting or people that I'm hiring for different stages of the production.
I don't get what's going on, why his camera keeps blurring like crazy. Like, it keeps going out of focus, and he's like barely moving. I don't know what's going on with that, but that's like taking me out of the video.
That are outside of Canada. That works against me. Now, you might be like, wow, is it that simple, Muta? No, it's not. If you look at Linus Tech Tips, recently he was talking about with the WAN show when they were talking about tax credits and whatnot. And I've worked with Canadian tax credits. So basically the CPTC, which is a Canadian film and video production tax credit, is basically an entire system within the Canada Revenue Agency that we use to basically submit and get some of our money back in a refundable corporate tax credit. Now, this is great if you want to get some of your money back, especially if you're making productions in Canada. But this law, this system, as you're reading through this sheet right here, is more geared towards really large production houses and those big companies that I was talking about earlier, like Roger, Bell, and Shaw, which already have these divisions ready to go.
The law is always geared to benefit larger corporations. It's just what's true, and it really sucks.
Your average creator is not going to be able to do this because of the fact that they don't have their own companies. They may not have the money to hire lawyers and accountants to do all of this. And even if they did, it'll take years, especially for somebody who's making content like me, to have everything ready, because the onus of paperwork is so heavily stacked against you that you're going to be spending a lot of money before you're going to be seeing the fruits of your labor, so to speak. So the entire Canadian, content system, the Canadian content, the tax credit system is all designed to work in conjunction to basically push if content is Canadian enough. Now, again, I don't believe, based on the law or the wording, that the online undertaking is including, people like me and you. If that was the case, obviously, most of us would not have the ability to get this going. But again, Canadian media companies may be present into it, broadcasting agencies. We'll have to see in the next coming months. But what this law or this area is trying to address is YouTube and Netflix and Spotify and a lot of these American tech companies now have to also produce Canadian content in the same manner as the broadcasters here. Now, this also brings another question into this.
So one thing that's really nice about this, if you think about Netflix, is that they're creating Canadian jobs because Canada now needs to push Canadian directors and Canadian actors in like their originals, right? I don't know what if the actors are even like native to Canada, or is that a Netflix original? I don't think so. But something like that, like Netflix is going to have to make its own Letterkenny kind of thing.
if it costs more money to operate in Canada and deal with these restrictions, what if Netflix or Amazon or Spotify or even YouTube says, forget it, we're just going to like pull out of the market, right? That, from what I'm understanding, business wise, that could be a possibility. If it costs more money to operate in Canada, and it costs a lot of money to also operate these regulations, because again, a lot of the established companies here already have the frameworks in place. But for Netflix, for YouTube, unless they're already preparing now, this could be a massive headache for some of these organizations, especially for Spotify, because they're pretty much what, the biggest radio broadcaster in the world at this point.
This also has a threat of like an Ouroboros kind of thing of eating its own tail. Because I was like on Linus Tech Tips, they were talking about this of like, well, Canada's passing this now. What if like Turkey passes it for their own country, and what if another country? What if the UK passes it? What if Russia? Like, what if every country under the sun passes it? And now these companies that produce worldwide web content can only produce content pretty much for their own country, and it's too expensive to operate in every single country. And they're going to operate in pretty much only in their own country and become smaller, and it's just going to hurt every person in this. And instead of like a large YouTube, you're going to have like, yeah, large YouTube in America, and there's going to be another company that does something similar in Canada, but maybe not. Maybe this these systems, the country doesn't have enough capital in its system for someone to even create that kind of content in that country. So it has a very Ouroboros possible effect.
So yeah, this is not going to be an easy fix, an easy situation, and I could see that some smaller companies, maybe not YouTube or Netflix because they got so much money to burn, but some smaller agencies might think it's easier to leave the market and just stay to the States. Because even if you look at the population of Canada, like again, we're less than the entire pop of like what? California? We're not a massive country. So again, I don't know what the government is expecting trying to put the vice grip like this, but you know, we'll have to see. So looking into section 4.2, which is regulations onto it, for the purpose of this paragraph, the Commission may make regulations prescribing programs in respect within this act applies in a manner that is consistent with freedom of expression. So in 2A, the extent to which a program, so again, up here they said non-application, which is a social media services act, does not apply in respect to online undertakings whose broadcasts consist only of programs in respect to which this act does not apply under this subsection. So the extent to which a program uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service like YouTube, like TikTok, Facebook, directly or indirectly generates revenue. So yes, your YouTubers make money. TikTokers make money. People, if I upload my podcast or some ordinary podcast to Spotify and we make money, this would theoretically fall under this regulation. The Commission could consider that. The fact that such a program has been broadcast in whole or in part by a broadcast undertaking that is required to be carried on under a license or is required to be registered with the Commission but does not provide a social media service, and the fact that such a program has been assigned a unique identifier under an international standard system. So because of the vagueness of 4.2,
this part's starting to lose me. There's a lot going on here.
it's what a lot of these like coalitions are calling out. This would still broadly provide powers to a vast majority of content that is uploaded to YouTube, Spotify, or TikTok. It could be regulated. That's the problem. And if it's regulated, what they mean by that is it could be affected in the algorithms, which, like I told you earlier in the video, is ultimately a net negative for the average Canadian, content creator. If anybody is feeding you the Kool-Aid that says this helps you because, hey, more Canadians are going to hear about you, remember, you're in the global village. If the government regulations, if the government, approved, recommendation system works against you, you're losing in the global village. For us creators, it's a bad situation. Let me explain just in terms of numbers that most people can understand.
I mean, are we going to have, I was going to say, are we going to have like separate channels, American some ordinary gamers and Canadian some ordinary gamers, but I think that would also hurt them. I don't think that would help them anymore either.
Canada has a population of 38.25 million as of 2021. And of course, California, the state of California, has a population as of 2013, 40.2 million, still larger than all of my country. So again, obviously, when it comes to the breakdown of my channel metrics, it's the United States, which is my most viewed country, the United Kingdom. Canada probably comes at number 5. And if Canada, if that small percentage could affect me in the overall village, I'm losing. That's the problem here, and that's why Canadian creators are a bit worried. Now, I assume if I move to the United States and I move my YouTube channel to a US-based AdSense, a US-based service, I would be out of the Canadian algorithm or out of the regulation.
So would he not, because he's a Canadian native originally, but the country's the content's American? What is he trying to not get pushed more in Canada and reduce his Canadian viewership or algorithm push to help his overall algorithm push? And then, but here's the question: would he still be counted as Canadian content to be pushed in the algorithm, though, even if he moved to America?
And I would be treated as an American. Now, for Canadian creator or Canadian viewers, Canadian content consumers, you might be like, how do I get the algorithm I want? I'm pretty sure if you use a VPN service, you'll probably be able to skirt outside the government regulation, provided your account obviously isn't set to Canada. That might be the only way you can get out of it. And generally, I think I'm scared in the world that's coming at us, because if we're going to need VPNs to bypass government regulations and government monitoring and government alterations of our social media feeds, it's a fucked up world we're living in. And, you know, Canada...
I mean, what do you mean if? It's already a fucked up world we're living in?
Still doesn't worry me, because I don't think the population of viewers is high enough to truly affect the metrics. But if a law like this passes in the United States, then we're all uber fucked. If this passes in the United Kingdom, if a law like this gets drafted, we're all fucked. That's the ultimate issue. The internet, of large, especially when it comes to social media services, is headed in a bad place if countries start regulating it like this.
If the internet has needed some kind of regulation, I'll say, mainly like applications, I think. And that's why you see like freaking Congress interviewing people and they don't know shit. But yeah, this is a bad kind of regulation, especially because, like I said, the Ouroboros effect. It's just gonna eat its own tail. We're gonna create regulation, and then every other country's gonna create more regulation similar, and it's going to destroy the companies that we're trying to regulate. Like, YouTube is going to go poof if this kind of thing keeps going.
Now, of course, I'm trying to be calm and I'm trying to explain it in the possible way. This situation has become so politicized that, again, I'm just trying to give you the facts of the situation. No, this isn't a censorship bill, but the broadness of the bill can affect what you do see in your feeds at the end of the day. And regardless of what the liberal government is going to tell you, broad laws like this are bad. Now, of course, the conservative government of Canada will tell you this is a fucking way of censorship and control and government surveillance, and it's not that deep. You really have to read the law, and you really have to see just the broadness of it. That's the real bad part. Hopefully there's some emergency meetups. Maybe they can get some things amended. Look, at the end of the day, Canadian politics are truly a cancer of its own. Living in Toronto my whole life, I've never, especially in the last couple of years, I've never met anybody that likes Trudeau. I've never met anybody that likes Ford. Never met anybody that likes Singh. Never met anybody that likes any of these parties. I feel like a lot of these political groups are way too out of touch, and the only reason we vote for them is to just get our like cultural push, if you will, our independent cultural like desires into the country, and it really does show. Laws.
Hey, doesn't it sound like Canada is just like America in that?
Like this.
We only vote for people because it's who we voted for forever.
That are broad, that if I have emailed all the MPs that I could, everywhere, none of it ever matters. Now, I don't even disagree with the idea of Canadian content necessarily. I mean, yes, the American media machine is so large, it can dominate entire countries around the world. It's one of the biggest pieces of conquest that America has. But
Yeah, like I was saying, we're a cultural exporter. The whole world consumes our media, our TV shows, our movies, our music.
I don't want to see Canadian content just because it's Canadian on my feeds or televisions or movie services. I want to see it because it's good. There's plenty of Canadian media companies, plenty of Canadian actors, actresses, directors, editors, so on and so forth, musicians that are talented and are successful all over the world.
The problem is a lot of them come to America, like Ryan Reynolds.
Not because they're Canadians, but because they just produce really, really good content. And I think for a lot of YouTubers out there, which, you know, may or may not be affected, given at least that one vague amendment of the law, look, there's a niche that is filled for everything on the internet. We're a global village now, and again, this law really does feel like it's designed to appease a lot of these former legacy media companies that are kicking up to politicians. Because at the end of the day, a politician is like a fucking fancy beggar in a suit. All right, as long as you pay them enough, they will definitely swing towards your side. But at the end of the day, this is like old legacy media trying to throw its last final death throes before it ultimately does die out. You know, this is the age of the internet, a future age where, you know, your content creators.
Yeah, TV has been clinging onto life. It's been on life support forever now. Like ABC, CNN, CNBC, yeah, all that stuff. Fox, they're clinging to life from all the like Netflix and YouTube. It's eating it all up.
Are you know, they're more personalized, they're more geared towards you, and if you want to find certain pieces of content on the internet that wouldn't have existed 10 years ago, you got it now. But ladies and gentlemen, Weird Bill C11, I'll have to see in the next few months what it looks like, but you know, if it really does affect YouTubers, which I don't think.
Yeah, C11 is it's a kind of scary bill on the fact of like no one knows exactly what's going to happen with it. That's the main thing. No one knows what's going to happen.